Hello everyone and welcome to Painting Crafty. Today's Christmas in July event, I'm going to be showing you how to create this bust out canvas. They've been popular on social media and I haven't done one yet, so I wanted to give it a try. I'm going to be creating a little mixed media piece in the back first on a round that I purchased at my local Dollar Tree store. And then this fun canvas, this round canvas, I found it at my local Joann Fabrics. So it was a great find to be able to put it together and create this fun bust out canvas. Today's tutorial is a part of the Christmas in July event, Merry Christmas Palooza. Our host today is the lovely Annie from Indie Annie Jones. You're going to find the link to her channel inside of my description box, as well as the playlist for all the other creatives. You're definitely going to want to take some time and hit that playlist link so you can watch everyone. I'm sure you're going to be inspired. I know it's only July, but Christmas will be here sooner than what we think. Well, let's get started and I'll show you my beginning steps. I spied this round canvas at my local Joann's and I thought it would work perfectly to create this type of style of canvas. I chose the canvas and then I used the round from my local Dollar Tree store to be able to create the back on it. I'm going to do a mixed media piece on there, so it's going to work perfectly for that backing. I wanted to choose two different styles of paper. One will be rolled back and create the explosion part, and then the other one is for the front. I could simply take off the little extras that were on there, and I went ahead and cut the string off because I'm not going to use that. And it really didn't matter about the holes because at the end they're just going to get covered. I found my paper at my local Joann's as well. I chose this kind of vintage paper music look for the inside for the explosion part, and then I thought the blue would look great with a kind of a nice little scene for a manger. So the way I created the inside to measure is I just laid my paper down and just pushed it in with my fingers and just grooved around it to create kind of the shape that I was going to be able to cut out. Once I had that groove in there, I just took my scissors and just simply kind of cut around it. It wasn't too important that it fit exact. In the end, it worked out just fine. Once I had it all kind of cut, then I used my Liquitex. This is my go-to acrylic medium that I like to use. You could use Mod Podge or whatever your favorite glue is, but put a fair amount inside so you have a nice wet surface. Then just go ahead and put your paper on the inside. This is going to be what you're going to see rolled up. I had this little squeegee I used and I just kind of pressed my paper down in there. Now to do the front, I just put more of my glue down and brushed it over, a nice coat, and I just basically laid my paper down, used my squeegee again, and just made it nice and smooth, and let that all dry. On my channel, I like to do lots of different art types of things, so I created a mixed media piece to go on the back of mine. Now you could just simply use a napkin or some sort of printable that you might have to create your background, whatever you would like inside. What I did is I just took a variety of different neutral papers, tore them up, and then glued them on with my matte medium to create a background for what I was going to build my collage on. Once my papers were dry, I just simply used some sandpaper and sanded the edges and created a nice smooth edge all the way around. Next up was the painting step. I'm going to be using a golden paint that is the color Payne's Gray. It's one of my favorites. I love this color. It's a beautiful navy color. Now, if you don't have Payne's Gray, you could always use some sort of navy on your picture if you're going to be doing this. I encourage everyone to try. It really is a simple look, and it's a wonderful, fun mixed media piece to make. I'm just applying my paint on. It was getting a little old, so I ended up using a little bit of my matte medium to thin my paint out, and I just simply brushed it on. I wanted it to be a little darker around the edges, so I ended up applying it that way and then taking a baby wipe and just spreading it out a little bit, giving it a little bit of tap, and creating just a really pretty background. I wanted to go ahead and find the center of my circle, so I measured it and then I just put a dot right in the middle. That just gave me an idea of where I was going to build my piece, center it up, where I was going to put my tree, because I'm building a manger scene. My first paper item that I make is a Christmas tree for the background. I just went ahead and made a simple little triangle shape. I started out with this darker green, but in the end I do change it, and that's one of my oopsies, but you're going to see how I'll be able to fix it. The next set of paper items I created are little presents. I just created a variety of rectangles and square shapes. The theme for the manger scene is the greatest gift. So these are the gifts that are going underneath my tree. Once I have a selection of papers, it took a little bit to kind of choose which colors I wanted. I ended up getting rid of that bright turquoise. Let me know if you think that was a good idea. So here's when I decide I want a different tree. So I just took it off and basically cut a new one and just glued it back on with the same glue. I was able to fix it fairly easily. Now I went ahead and just layered my presents on underneath my tree. I like this selection of colors. I like the gold, and some of my papers had metallics on them. They were super pretty. They just came from a paper pack that I got at Joann's. Once I had all my little presents on, I did go ahead and use a little bit of coffee stain. It was just instant coffee mixed with water, and I just brushed that over the whole thing and stained it. Now this is another oopsie I did. I really had wished that I had taken and inked the edges of all of my papers. So a solution is I tried to use my Stabilo pencil, Mark's-All pencil, and then I just kind of drew around it and added some water. It kind of worked, but I really wish I would have inked the pages. This is my favorite tissue paper. I bought this at Target. It has stars. If you ever run into this, I would say buy it. If you love to do mixed media, this tissue paper, I have used it many times and it's one of my favorites. I did add a little coffee stain over the top of that white tissue paper just to make it and tone it down so it would all blend in my background. I didn't have a star for the top of my tree, so I had this little piece of jewelry and I just used a little bit of marker to make it a little bit more gold. I tested out some bows and some fabric, some ideas to make my packages a little bit more interesting. I went ahead and just used the scissors and cut the bottom off rounded. So the packages all look great when they had all of their little extras on top. I went ahead and put one more coat of my Liquitex acrylic medium over the top just to seal everything down. It helps so that the coffee isn't so sticky either. I went ahead and used chalk to go ahead and do my baby Jesus with. I just chalked in a simple circle and then just kind of a round shape for his body. These are some of the colors that I used. Nothing special, just choose a white, a gold, 2 different tans, and maybe a dark brown, and that's about all you need. I just went ahead and used my brush and created my round circle. This is about the size of a quarter. And then I just did another kind of a sideways circle. Nothing too fancy. If you could do a circle and a squishy circle, you can paint this. I went ahead and did the manger underneath. It's basically an upside down triangle shape. You're just going to wrap it around your little baby on the bottom. And then it needs some crossbars at the bottom just to be able to make it look like it's standing up. I didn't wash my brush off. I just kind of keep on blending my colors, so it's just mostly just the browns and the golds all blended together. The hay is tucked up there tight and brushed over the white part of the baby, so it looks like he's laying down in the manger. And that's basically it. It's pretty easy painting. I did add a halo to my baby as well, and I used the Deco Color. It's a really pretty bright shiny gold marker. It works great for this. Up next, I wanted to add a little bit more interest to my packages. So I have these ribbons. I believe I got them at my Dollar Tree. I've had them for a while. They're just in my stash. It's always a good idea when you're doing these small mixed media pieces is just use what you have. Search around, see what you have. When you're at your thrift stores, always take a look and see if they have those extra buttons or old jewelry pieces. I wanted to be able to create a garland look across my tree, so I glued down some buttons. I always like to have thread on the inside of my buttons. I wanted to use a little bit of crochet thread to create my simple garland. The outside paper on this project has a little bit of white, so I thought this would be another great way to add just a little bit more white to my mixed media piece. So I'm just going to crisscross it back and forth. And then again, this is where I end up with another oopsie. I decided I wanted to move a button. Probably not the best idea I had, and I did end up ripping the paper. Yep, right there. But I went ahead and I just moved my button where I needed it, glued down the little bit of the paper that I had there, and I do end up painting it at the end. When all else fails, I always can get out my acrylic paint and fix a lot of oopsies. So this is where I get out my green. I decided to use a lighter green because I was kind of feeling like my tree was a little darker than what I wanted it anyway. So I just took a little bit of my lighter shade of green, mixed some white with it, and just kind of scrubbed it in. So it's a light wash of color over the top. Even mixed a little bit more coffee in there as well. So then I just kind of add my buttons where I want them, go ahead and give it a snip, And I really liked how it all turned out with that crisscrossing back and forth. That's kind of the one nice thing about doing these little mixed media pieces is that even if you think you do an oopsie, a lot of times all you have to do is just get out some more paint and cover it up, and in the end, probably no one's going to notice. I wanted to add a few little bows at the top, so I chose a variety of strings. I had some jute twine, and then I have a necklace cording that's really a thin cording, and it really makes a nice whimsical loose bow style. I like using that little cording. I pretty much have my mixed media piece done, so now I need to move on to the front of my canvas. The color of the paper I chose and the pattern, I really like it, but I wanted to tone it down just a little bit. So I'm using a little bit of an antiquing ink on the top. Those little rounded daubers work perfectly for spreading out the ink, and it just helps so you don't get some really harsh lines or big circle lines as well. So I knew I wanted to tone down the white a little bit on the inside of my paper, and I'm going to be definitely adding some around the edge. Now to figure out how I want to cut the center part. I thought it might be helpful to have some sort of pattern to be able to figure out where the center was of my circle. Of course, I could have just eyeballed it, but I just put some copy paper in the inside, pressed it, and made a circle of my paper or a template, and that was just going to help me be able to find the center of my paper. I was a little nervous about just going ahead and cutting, so this was my solution to that. Once I had the pattern all cut out, I was able to fold it in the center and crease it along the line, and then fold it again. And this was going to help me find where the center of my piece was. So I could open it up, lay it flat, and then have a little bit of a template to be able to see where the center was easily. I have a pair of sharp scissors, a little fussy cut scissors. I used that to puncture a hole right in the middle where my lines crossed, and that worked pretty well. I lifted it up, but then I decided maybe even to make the hole a little larger before I was going to cut it. So I had an awl, and I just used my awl and I pushed it all the way through and just kind of rotated it back and forth and made my hole a little bit larger before I used my scissors to cut it. I decided to use a scissors instead of a straight edge blade. I just thought it would make it easier and simpler to cut. Plus, I didn't really have a long straight edge to fit that would fit on the inside, so it was a simple solution. But first I took a piece of paper and I was trying to decide how many actual lines I wanted to cut. So I thought I would measure from my center hole. I just used some watercolor paper that I had cut just to use as a measuring device. First, I went up like so, and then I was going to make lines that were going to be off to the side, kind of like creating a peace sign is what I thought I would be doing. By doing a peace sign, I would have had 3, and then I thought, well, maybe I would want to have 5, so I tried drawing my lines. And I didn't measure it correctly. I am horrible at measuring. But anyway, I ended up with 4 right away. I went into my center and I just started cutting. These little sharp scissors work really well for this task. I went ahead and I went up just a part way. I didn't know how far I wanted to cut in. So originally I just did short little cuts on each side. It did help to actually cut all of the edges first, just a little bit. It helped relax the canvas so I could get my hand in there easier and was able to cut it a lot better. I was a little nervous on not knowing how far to cut it in. In the end, I do end up cutting quite a ways back than what I really originally thought. I think at this point I'm realizing I didn't really measure it correctly and I'm only going to be having 4 pieces. But again, it's all a learning process and it all turns out in the end. And actually I end up making a lot more cuts than what I originally thought I was going to. So here's the fun part. You start peeling it back. You can see where I'm testing now and I realize I do need to cut a little bit farther back if I'm going to be able to see anything on the inside. This particular frame from the Art Smith, this round one, does have a really large border all the way around the wooden part or whatever it might be made out of. Masonite board, I guess is what it is. It is pretty wide. It's very sturdy. And so it works well to be able to cut all the way back. Plus I needed to be able to see that star and my presents and all those other items. So now I'm really getting cavalier, and I just go ahead and I just freehand it and I cut an extra strip in between each of the ones I already cut. This little canvas projects are really kind of interesting because you don't really need to glue those little pieces back. All you'd use is something to curl them around with. I used a dowel here is what I used. And it's going to stay. It's not really going to roll back on itself. So it's really kind of neat of how this little canvas trick works. You don't have to add glue. Now you could add glue if you wanted to, but it really will stay for you. There's something about the layered paper with the glue and the canvas that it will stay. I can see why people are enjoying creating these, because with that pulled back paper look of having those two different colors and the two different papers really makes a very interesting look. It makes it look so much more complicated than it really is. So once I had it all set up, I decided that I wanted to use a little bit more ink. The edges where I cut them, you could see the white edge of the canvas, and since my papers were rather dark and had more age to it, I went ahead and took my little ink pad and I inked all the way around the torn edge or the exploded edges, and it really did finish it off nicely. Next up was the gluing part. I needed to be able to attach that back round to my inside of my frame. And you can see that little round frame with the canvas, that little pleated look, little pleats on the edges. They're quite deep, and I knew I was going to need a glue that was going to stay fairly wet for quite a long time. So I ended up using the glue, the clear glue by Aleene's. The clear tacky glue. It would stay wet for fairly long, and I just tacked in just a little bit of the hot glue, not a lot. And then I ended up clipping it and adding some clamps all the way around. I did add a little bit of wax paper on my edges. I was a little afraid I might end up with some marks, but it worked really well. I let it dry, and then it seemed to work really well to be able to use that glue that was wet a little bit longer, and it went down into the cracks. I wanted to say a special thank you again to Annie for hosting today's Merry Christmas Palooza. You definitely want to go check out her page. She's always got so many creative ideas, as well as check out the playlist. Click that link inside of the description box. I thought one more interesting fun thing to do would be to add lights. This frame does have a little bit of a ridge all the way around, kind of like a shadow box, so I thought it would be perfect to add some fairy lights. I'm just using a little scrapper fabric and some hot glue to be able to tack my lights all the way around, and that worked really well. You'll have to let me know if you like the idea of adding the fairy lights. I decided to use some jute twine to cover the white edges of my canvas. I thought it worked really well. I just used some hot glue and it covered the edges fairly well. I wanted to add a little bit more gold, so I used Folk Art Treasure Gold paint, and I dry brushed it onto the turnbacks as well as the back of the mixed media piece, and I added some onto the front of the navy. It was just a nice finishing touch. Well, even though I had some oopsies, I think it turned out really nice. And if you're new to my channel and you like to do art, why don't you consider going ahead and subscribing? Click that bell, you'll get notifications. Leave me a comment. Do you think you might make this? Give me a thumbs up if you think you like this project as well. Well, thanks everyone for hanging out with me today, and maybe you'll come back and visit me again, and next time you'll bring your art stuff and create with me.